It was written almost certainly between 739 BC and 701 BC. I didn't put down the place here, in Judah, the southern half of Solomon's Old Kingdom. 739 to 701. Now, what's the situation? And this is covered here on this background sheet. This book is very odd because the latter part of it, chapters 40 to 66, are addressed to people in the distant future from Isaiah's own lifetime. Now, other prophets talk about people and situations in the future. This is the only one where the prophet talks to people in the future. And that has caused a lot of scholars to say, well then, obviously, Isaiah didn't write those chapters. You can't talk to people 150 years in the future. Well, not unless you're talking for God. That might make a difference. I think it does. The book says it was written by Isaiah, and that's good enough for me. But, first of all, chapters 1 to 39 were written to people in Isaiah's own lifetime. Now, look at your map for a moment, please. What is happening during Isaiah's lifetime? The empire of Assyria. See it up here on the right center? It's where the Kurds live today. The Kurds pride themselves on being the descendants of the Assyrians, and everybody agrees with them. The Assyrians were building a world empire. They had already conquered Babylon down to the southeast. They had already conquered what is today Armenia and eastern Turkey up to the north. They had already conquered the lands straight west of them out to the Mediterranean. And now, during this time period, 739 to 701, they are embarking on their last climactic century of empire, and they are headed for their ultimate goal, which is Egypt. If they could control Babylon, Egypt, and the connector between them, they would have a stranglehold on world trade. War has always been about trade, and it was then as well. But they had one problem. Between their empire at the moment and Egypt stood this narrow Canaanite strip. This strip of land between the Mediterranean on the west and the Arabian desert on the east, only about 100 miles wide. And all the trade of the world funneled through there. This is how Solomon could become so, if I may say it, obscenely rich. He had the only toll booth on I-75 between Port Huron and Miami. So if the Assyrians are going to get to Egypt, they've got to walk over several of these 8 little nations. They've got to conquer Syria with its capital at Damascus. And it's awfully important that you keep that clear in your mind. Assyria is the great world empire. Syria is the small country here with its capital at Damascus. 2 different things, 2 entirely different things. So they've got to conquer Syria. They've got to conquer Israel. They've got to conquer Philistia. That's where the great highway runs. And it would be a good idea if they took out Judah at the same time. Otherwise, they're sitting up on their hill in a position to take pot shots at them. Along the way, there are some other countries. There is Tyre and Sidon, wealthy Phoenicians controlling the shipping on the Mediterranean. There is Ammon and Moab and Edom. So these are in the way, and the Assyrians are coming. In 722, Israel fell. From 710 to 700, the Philistine cities fell. In 701, the Assyrians tried to take out Judah, conquered every city except Jerusalem, but they didn't conquer Jerusalem. We'll talk about that. Ammon, Moab, Edom also fell in the next 25 years or so. So this is the situation that Isaiah is dealing with. This terrific imperial pressure coming from the north and all that is involved with that. Now, when we come to the end of chapter 39, Jerusalem has been delivered. Hezekiah has not been slaughtered as the Assyrians normally did to rebel kings. But Isaiah tells him the day is coming when God is not going to deliver Jerusalem. In fact, he is going to deliver Jerusalem to Babylon. Wait a minute. Assyria is the world empire. Where does Babylon come into this thing? Well, Assyria, in its growth, was much like a balloon. It was a military dictatorship. If the dictator was strong, the empire expanded. If the dictator was weak, the empire contracted. But over about 300 years, there was a succession of ultimately stronger dictators. And so the balloon would contract and expand, and finally it reached its greatest point of expansion about 650, when they finally did conquer Egypt. And within 45 years, Assyria ceased to exist. The balloon expanded and expanded and expanded, and pop, and it was gone. It was conquered by a coalition of the Babylonians, and it's not on this map, but you could write it in there above Assyria to the right of Kala, the Medes. They lived in the mountain chain that runs from northwest to southeast along the Tigris River. Fearsome warriors. And the Babylonians and the Medes allied together and defeated the Assyrians in 605. As you see there on the sheet, King Jehoiakim of Judah accepted the Babylonian overlordship, but then shortly after he revolted. And Nebuchadnezzar came and conquered the city in 598 and put Jehoiakim's brother, Zedekiah, on the throne. Well, Zedekiah, he was a politico, if there ever was a politico. He ruled by poll. Whatever was the popular thing of the day, that's what he was for. And ultimately, the popular thing of the day was revolt against Babylon, and he did. And in 586, Jerusalem was destroyed. The leadership were either killed or taken into captivity, and a military governor was put on the throne. Despair, total despair. God has been defeated. It's all over. And Isaiah, writing by inspiration, says, no, 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 it's not true. You have been punished, that's for sure. But that does not mean that God has been defeated. I said you were going to go into captivity. You denied it. You're in captivity, aren't you? I now say I'm going to deliver you from captivity. The Assyrians had been practicing captivity since about 900. So for 400 years, people have been taken into captivity. Nobody ever went home that we know of. So when the prophets say you're going to go home, the people say you're nuts. Number one, we're not going to go into captivity. And number two, if we do, we'll never come home again. And the prophets say, you will go into captivity and you will come home. Guess what? The prophets were right. In 539, the Medes jumped ship and joined with the Persians. On your map there, that would be where, well, you see it there, Persia, modern Iran. And the Persians, with the assistance of the Medes, destroyed Babylon. And they said, any captive people that wants to can go home. We only know of one, the Jews. And I think the reason is because they were ready. Some of them said, you know what? Those prophets were right when they said we would go into captivity. Maybe they're going to be right that they say we'll go home. We're not going to become assimilated to the Babylonians. They kept their identity. And sure enough, they went home. So that's 40 to 55. Now, there's less agreement on the time frame of 56 to 66, but most scholars think that Isaiah is here addressing the situation after the people returned. They returned in 539 in a great flurry of excitement. Whoa, we're going to rebuild the temple. And when they started to rebuild the temple, they realized that what they were building was not going to be better than Solomon's temple that had been burned down. It was going to be worse. And they immediately got discouraged. And Isaiah is speaking to them when he says, if you will choose to live for God in righteousness, your light will dawn. You will become what you were intended to be, a lantern out of which the flame of God can shine on the world. And that's what chapters 56 to 66 are about. So it appears that Isaiah is addressing two situations in the future. One, about 550, people are in exile and discouraged. And the other, maybe around 500, when the people have returned and are discouraged. And he is then, in the total sweep of the book, giving us a very, very comprehensive picture of who God is and what he wants to do in the world.